The horns came off the water at the failing of the light, and I knew them for what they were before the second note had climbed the cliff. I was in the muster yard with the smell of the sea in my teeth when the sound reached me, low and wet and wrong, the note the reavers of the vault blew across their prows, so that a hold would hear its own dying announced before the ships had even touched the shingle. 3 seasons I had waited for that sound. 3 seasons since we had broken them at the iron mouth and let their ships limp north with their dead, and I had told my captains they would come back for it, that a wolf like Gan the Gaunt does not forget a wound, he keeps it warm. They had not believed me. They believed me now. Fires, I said, and my voice went out over the yard flat and hard, and it moved men the way a hand moves them. Every basin on the wall lit, gate chains up, get the children down. The last of it I said to no one and to everyone, and the yard came apart into running. Kethmore is not a soft place. We are a black cliff hold on the worst shoulder of the iron sea, where the water is the color of a blade all year, and the wind has scraped the trees to their knees, and my people are the kind the coast makes spare, salt-cured, slow to warm and slower to break. I had ruled them 11 years, since the season the gray sickness took my brother Havard and left me his crown and his boy and a hold that had never wanted a second son for its king. I had made my peace with all of it, the cold hall, the long watches, the knowledge sitting quiet in me like a stone worn smooth, that a man in my seat does not always get the whole of a life, that I would have the wall and the pack and my brother's son to raise and no more than that, and that it was enough. I had stopped listening years ago for the thing other men listened for. The sea was loud enough to fill the place where that listening had been. So I was not listening for anything but the enemy when I came up onto the sea-wall and saw them. 12 ships, long, black-hulled, low to the water, coming in on the last of the tide with their oars beating like something breathing. 12, where 3 seasons ago there had been 6. Gan had spent the winters well. Behind me the wall basins caught and flared one after another down the whole length of the hold, throwing our light out over the black water so the reavers would know we had seen them. And by that light I counted the ships again and did not like the count any better the second time. "They're heavy in the stern," said Bren beside me, my wall captain, gray as a gull who had held this wall for my brother before me. He had the eyes for it. "Empty hulls ride high. Those are riding to fill. They've come for the stores." They've come for more than the stores. I did not have to say what. Every soul on that wall knew what a reaver lord takes from a hold when he can take it, and what such a boy is worth in ransom, and that my brother's son was the only child in the whole of the Iron Sea worth a king's weight in silver. Cale was 5 years old and the heir to Kethmore and asleep, I hoped, in the high chamber with his nurse, and I felt the whole night bend itself toward him like water toward a drain. "Get the boy to the caves," I said. "Now, not the keep, the caves. If they come over the wall, the keep is a box. The caves have the sea behind them." Bren went. Below me, the shingle gate groaned up on its chains, and my shield line poured down onto the strand to meet the boats, and I went with them, because a king who watches his wall from the top of it is a king who will not have a wall for long. The first keel ground into the shingle, and the reavers came off it the way they always come, fast and silent and low. No war cries, no horns now, just the wet slap of feet on stone and the gray shine of iron. And then the strand was a place where men were killing one another in the light of the burning basins, and there was no more time for counting ships. I will not make it sound like a song. There is no song in it. There is the jar up your arm when iron meets iron, and the smell, and the way the shingle turns under your boots so that every step is a small betrayal, and the terrible ordinary work of it. I fought at the head of my line, and my wolves fought around me, the gray pack of Kethmore, that no reaver has ever learned to stand against, throwing themselves at the boat so that men fell back into the surf. And for a while, a good while, we held them at the water's edge and the strand was ours. And then Gan changed the shape of it. I felt it before I understood it. The pressure went out of the center where I stood, and it went to the flanks, and I heard my line shout a warning from the north end of the strand where the cliff stair comes down. He had put men in the water. He had sent 2 boats wide in the dark while we bled ourselves on the strand, landed them past the reach of our basins, and sent them up the north stair, the stair that comes up not to the wall but to the low court, the kitchen court, the soft belly of the hold behind our own gate, the stair that the children would be crossing to reach the caves. I have never in my life run the way I ran then. I left the strand to Bren's shout in my captain's hands, and I took the inner stair 3 treads at a leap with my wolves streaming up the black rock ahead of me. And the whole time there was a sound in my head that was not the sea and not the fighting, a single flat note of pure understanding, that I had put my line at the water and left the door at my own back, and that Gan the Gaunt had counted on it, had counted on me being the kind of king who guards the wall and forgets the kitchen. And that he was right. I came up into the low court and into the worst of it. The reavers were already among the outbuildings, 6, 8, hard to tell in the leaping light, and my household men were dying to hold them. Cooks and grooms and boys with billhooks against sea-wolves with axes, and it was not a battle, it was a breaking, and through the middle of it across the open court went a knot of children. I saw the nurse. I saw 2 of the older girls with the little one's hands gripped white in theirs. I saw, at the back, dropped behind because he had stopped, because he was 5 and the fires had frightened him, and his legs had simply stopped the way a child's legs will, my brother's son, alone in the open with a reaver already turning toward him, already seeing what he was, already lifting the axe. And I was too far. I knew it the way you know a thing in your body before your mind will hold it, the distance, the reaver's arm, my own speed, laid one over the other, and the answer coming out wrong. Too far. A dozen strides too far and no wolf near enough, and the axe already at the top of its arc. That is when she crossed the light. I did not know her name that night. I want to say that plainly because of what she became to me and because I do not want to pretty it up. I did not know her. She was a figure out of the kitchen dark, a girl in a scullion's gray with her sleeves pushed up and flour or ash on her forearms, and she came out of the low door of the still room at a dead run, and she did not run away from the reaver the way every sane thing in that court was running. She ran at him, at the axe, at my brother's son. She reached Cale a breath before the blow, and she did the only thing there was to do, the thing there was no time to think, and so she cannot have thought it. She went down over him. She put her own back where the boy's head had been and wrapped him in her arms and turned her body into a wall between the child and the iron, and the axe that had been meant to open my brother's son came down instead across her. I heard it. Across all that noise, across the whole ruined court, I heard the sound it made, and something in me that had been asleep for 11 years came awake all at once, and it came awake screaming. I do not remember crossing the last of the ground. I am told I made a sound that emptied the court around me. I do not remember it. I remember the reaver's face turning and the surprise on it, and then I was on him and it was very quick and he was not a problem anymore. And then I remember going down onto my knees on the wet stone beside the 2 of them, the boy and the girl, and my hands not knowing where to go, and the whole world narrowing to the small gray shape curled around my brother's son. Cale, my own voice strange to me. Cale, look at me. He was screaming a good sound, a living sound, the best sound I have ever heard and unhurt, whole, not a mark on him, because she had made herself a roof over him and the roof had held. I pulled him out from under her as gently as a thing so frightened can be moved and put him into the arms of the nurse, who had come back for him, who would have died coming back for him. And I turned to the girl. She had rolled onto her side when the weight of the boy came off her. Her eyes were open. Her hand was pressed to her own side and the gray of her dress had gone black and wet under it and was spreading, and she was looking up at me with an expression I have spent the rest of my life trying to understand, not fear, though she must have been afraid, not pride, though God knows she had earned it, something quieter than either. She looked at me the way you look at a thing you have finished, as if she had done the one thing she was for, and could now put it down. "Is he," she said, and could not finish it, and I understood that the whole of her question was the boy. "He's whole," I said. "You saved him, he's whole." Something eased in her face. Her eyes started to close. "No," I got my arm under her. "No, you don't stay with me. Look at me stay." And it was then, with her blood soaking through the sleeve of my own arm, and the court still full of dying men and my hold still under the axe, it was in that impossible moment that the thing happened which I had stopped believing would ever happen to me. The sea went quiet. I want you to understand what I mean by that, because it is the truest thing I can tell you, and it sounds like a small thing, and it was not small. I was born on this coast. I have never in my life, waking or sleeping, in health or in fever, in grief or in war, been without the sound of the iron sea. It is the floor under every other sound at Kethmore. It is in the stone. It is the thing you stop hearing the way you stop hearing your own blood. Always there, always under everything. The low, ceaseless roar of the water on the black rock that has not stopped for a single heartbeat in all the years the world has held this coast. It stopped. With her face turned up to mine and her hand gone slack in the wet dark, and the pulse of her fluttering under my fingers like something small trying to get out, the sea at Kethmore went silent, all at once, as though the whole gray weight of it had drawn a breath and was holding it. And in that silence, in the terrible hush where the sea had always been, there was only her. Her breath. Her heartbeat too fast, too light. The girl I did not know, in the dirt of my own kitchen court, with my brother's life still warm on her arms, and her own life running out of her onto the stone. And I knew, the way a man knows the ground he stands on, the way my brother must have known the day it happened to him, and I had watched it and not believed a word of it. I knew what she was to me. 11 years too late, in the middle of a battle over a woman whose name I would have to ask, I knew. My wolves came then. Not to the fighting on the strand was breaking. Bren had turned them at the water and the reavers were running for their boats. I could hear it even through the roaring silence. My wolves came up the north stair and into the ruined court, and they did not go to me, their king, bleeding and on my knees. They went to her. The gray pack of Kethmore, that has torn the throat from a reaver lord, and that no groom in this hold can lay a hand on, came and lay down around the dying scullion in a ring, close, their heads low, and one of them, old Ashgree, my brother's wolf, that had let no living soul but me touch her since Havard died, put her great head down against the girl's shoulder and keened, low in her chest, a sound I had heard that pack make exactly once before, on the night we buried my brother. They knew her too. I got my other arm under her knees and I stood up with her against my chest, and she weighed nothing. She weighed like the thing the sea leaves on the shingle after a storm, and I carried her up out of the court and into the hold. I have carried men off that strand before. I have carried them to the healers, and I have carried them to their graves, and I have never once carried one myself past the door. That is not what a king does. A king has hands for it. A king holds the wall while other hands hold the wounded. I did not give her to any hands. Master Oren, my hall steward, met me in the passage with his robe still clutched from where he had been hiding them from the fires, and he had opinions. Oren always has opinions. And I saw him look at the gray scullion's dress and the blood, and I saw the word forming on his face. The word this hold used for children like her, salt-orphan, the ones the sea leaves and the hold takes in to scrub its floors, not one of us. I saw him about to tell me there were servants for this, that I should not. That a king does not. I looked at him. I do not know what was in my face. Whatever it was, Oren shut his mouth over the word and stepped back against the wall and bowed, and behind him the others bowed. The whole crowding, frightened household of Kethmore pressed back against the passage walls and bowed, not to me, to the girl in my arms, because they had seen my face and they had understood before I had said a single word that the world had changed shape in the last quarter hour, and that the salt-orphan in the scullion's gray was not a servant any more and never would be again. I carried her to my own chamber. I laid her on my own bed. I called for the healers and I did not leave, And when old Maddox came with his needles and his fired iron and told me, not unkindly, that a king had a hold to see too and that this was no place for me, I told him what I had never told anyone, in 4 plain words that I did not fully understand myself yet, and that silenced the room. She is my mate. And then there was nothing in the world but the small hard work of keeping her in it, the needle, the iron, the long red hours, and outside my window, where the sea had roared without ceasing for the whole of my life, there was a silence I could not fill, waiting to be told whether it would ever end, or whether I had found the one thing I was made for only in time to watch it die on my own bed with its name still unknown to me. She did not wake that night. She did not wake the next. And I sat in the ruin of everything I had believed about my own life, and held the hand of a woman I had never spoken to, and waited to learn whether the sea would ever be allowed to speak again. She lived because she was stubborn, and because the axe had turned on a rib. Maddox told me that on the 3rd day, in the gray hour before dawn, in the voice men use when they have decided to give you a thing to hold, the blade had come down at an angle a hand's breadth from where it would have finished her. A rib had caught it and cracked and turned it, so that instead of her heart it had opened her side, long and deep, but not past mending, if the wound fever did not take her, if the bleeding did not come back, if. He gave me a great many ifs. I took them all and held them and did not sleep. I have watched over the wounded before. I had never done it like this, sat through the black middle of the night with a woman's cold hand in both of mine, breathing when she breathed, going still when her breath caught, as though I could keep the rhythm going by matching it. Her name was Allie's. I had it from the kitchen, from Wend, the old cook, who came to my door on that first gray morning twisting her apron in her hands and would not meet my eyes, and told me when I asked, that the girl was Allie's, that she had come to Kethmore as a net mender's orphan the winter she was 9, the sea having taken her people off the low cove in a storm, and that she had scrubbed the still room and mended the nets and dressed the small hurts of the kitchen ever since, and that no one— here Wen's voice went strange— no one had ever thought to ask her for anything but the work. "She's good with a wound, my lord," Wen said, still to the floor. "Better than she lets on. Half the burns and cuts in that kitchen, she's the one binds them, never a word about it. She'd not want me telling you even that much. And then, because she was old and had known my brother and was not entirely afraid of me, she's a good girl, my lord. Whatever Master Oren's face says, she's the best of us and none of us saw it. I'll not forgive myself that, and I'm too old to have much left to not forgive." So that was Allie's. A girl the sea had orphaned twice, once of her people, once of any place in the world that would call her its own, taken in to scrub floors, who bound the kitchen's hurts in secret and asked for nothing, and who had crossed a burning court against an axe for a boy that was not hers because there had been no one else to do it, and she was the kind of soul that cannot stand and watch. I sat with that. It rearranged me. Because you must understand what I had believed about the bond, we who are born to it and go looking for it. I had believed, when I still believed at all, that it would come like a trumpet, that the fates keep back for a king. Some hidden queen, a Luna of white fur and old blood, a woman whose worth is written in her line, and that recognizing her would be recognizing that greatness, one high thing knowing another. That is the story we are told. That is the story I had grieved quietly when it did not come for me, and had put away, and had told myself I did not need. And the fates had kept back for me a net mender's orphan with ash on her arms who dressed burns in secret and had never been thanked in her life. Not a hidden queen, not old blood. There was nothing hidden about Allie's at all. That was the thing that undid me, sitting there in the dark. Her worth had been in plain sight the whole time, worn openly every single day in that kitchen, in 100 small unwitnessed kindnesses, and the whole hold had looked straight through it because it came wrapped in a gray dress and answered to no name that mattered. The fates had not hidden my mate from me. They had set her in the middle of my own hold in the plainest sight, and waited 11 years to see whether I would ever have the eyes to find her, and I would not have, I knew it, kneeling there. I would have died an old mateless king with her scrubbing my floors, if a reaver's axe had not fallen and forced me to finally look. I have never been so ashamed of anything in my life. I have never been so grateful for anything either, both at once, in the dark, over her hand. The wolves would not leave. My chamber, those first days, was less a king's room than a den, the gray pack lying along the walls, across the doorway, one always with its head up and its eyes on the bed. Ashkree did not move at all. My brother's old wolf lay pressed against the side of the bed with her muzzle on the coverlet near Allie's hand. And when the fever came up on the fourth night and Allie's began to burn and to speak to people who were not there, it was Ashkree who keened, and would not be quieted, until the fever broke toward dawn and the girl went still and cool and slept a true sleep, and the wolf put her head down and slept too. Maddox, who had physicked this hold for 40 years and did not startle easily, watched all of this and said nothing, but I saw him make, once, an old sign over his chest that his grandmother's people used to make, the sign for a thing the sea has marked. She woke on the 6th day. I had gone, for the first time, to the window, the wound fever broken, Maddox cautiously willing to say the word mend, and I was standing there looking out at the gray water that I still could not hear, when a voice behind me, thin as thread, said, "This isn't the kitchen." I turned. Her eyes were open. They were gray, of course they were. Everything at Kethmore is gray, but they were the clear gray of the sky the morning after a storm, and they were fixed on the carved ceiling above my bed with an expression of pure, working confusion. "No," I said, my own voice was not steady. "It isn't." "This is." She turned her head, saw the wolves, saw the great gray shapes of the pack of Kethmore lying along the walls of the room she had woken in, and I watched her decide, visibly, that she was either dreaming or dead, and that in either case there was no use panicking about it. Her gaze traveled the room and reached me and stopped. "You're the king," she said. "I am. I'm in the king's bed." A pause while she assembled this. "With the king's wolves." Another pause, and the king. "You are." She was quiet a moment. Then, with the grave practicality of someone establishing the facts before deciding how frightened to be, "Am I in trouble?" And I, Torrin of Kethmore, who had broken Gan the Gaunt at the Iron Mouth, who had held this black wall 11 years and buried a brother and raised his son and made his cold peace with a mateless life. I put my face into my hand and I laughed, because it was that or weep, and I had done enough of the other in the dark nights and could not do it in front of her. "No," I said when I could. "No, Alice, you are not in trouble. You know my name." She said it wonderingly, as though it were the strangest thing that had happened, stranger than the wolves. "Nobody knows my name." "I know your name." I came and sat by the bed slowly, so as not to move the wolves, though not one of them stirred for me the way they had for her. "Do you remember what you did?" Her brow creased, and then it came back to her. I saw it come back, saw the court and the fires and the axe cross behind her eyes, and her hand, the one that could move, came up off the coverlet and gripped my wrist with a strength that startled me out of a body so lately near dead. "The boy," she said, "the little one, Cale, is he?" "Whole." I put my hand over hers. "Not a mark on him, because of you. He is asleep down the passage this minute with his nurse, and the first word out of him every morning since is your name, though he does not know it is your name. He only knows the girl who saved him. He will know it soon." I found my voice wanted to shake again, and I would not let it. "You put your body between my brother's son and a reaver's axe, Alice. You who owed him nothing, you who—" I stopped. "Why?" She looked at me as though I had asked her why the tide comes in. "There wasn't anybody else," she said simply. "He was little, there wasn't anybody else to do it." And then worried, misreading my silence. "Was it wrong, my lord, to be in the court? I was meant to be getting the small ones down to the caves. That's my job when the horns go. I know the ways down, and I turned back because I heard him crying and I thought." The grip on my wrist tightened. "I'll go back to the kitchen. As soon as I can stand. I didn't mean to be any trouble, I only—" "Alice." I had to stop her. She was lying in my bed with a reaver's wound half healed in her side. ringed by wolves that would let no other soul near her, and she was apologizing to me for the crime of having saved the heir to Kethmore, and promising to return quietly to scrubbing my floors. And I understood, all at once and completely, the shape of the life this girl had been given, a life in which the highest thing she could imagine was to not be any trouble. And I understood that whatever I had to say to her, I would have to say it carefully, and slowly, and more than once, because she had no framework in the whole of her experience into which the truth would fit. "You are not going back to the kitchen," I said. Fear crossed her face, the particular fear of the powerless, that a change is a punishment. "You're sending me away." "No," I took a breath. "Alice, I am going to tell you something, and it is going to sound like a madness, and I need you to let me finish before you decide it is one." I kept my hand over hers. "When you fell in the court, when I came to you, and you were bleeding on the stones, something happened to me that I had stopped believing would ever happen. Something we are born to, my kind, and go all our lives waiting for, and most of us never." I stopped, started again, plainer, because plain was the only thing that had ever been offered her, and I would not lie to her in fine words. The sea went quiet. My whole life I have heard it, every hour, waking and sleeping. "You cannot know, you would have to be born to this rock to know," and when I held you it went silent all at once, the way it does for exactly one thing, one time in the whole of a life if it does at all. I watched her face and could not read it. "You are my mate, Alice. The fates kept you back from me." I did not have the eyes to see it, and I am more ashamed of that than of anything I have ever done, that you were in my own hold for 11 years being the best soul in it, and I looked straight through you. But I see it now. The wolves see it. My brother's own wolf has not left your side. I am not going to send you anywhere. I am, if you will have it in your own time, of your own will and never otherwise, I am going to ask you to be the Luna of Kethmore. But first I am going to ask you a much smaller thing, which is that you let me thank you, which no one in this hold has ever properly done, for the whole of your good life. So, Alice, and I did a thing no king of Kethmore has done in living memory, and I did not care. I bent my head over her hand where it lay in mine, and I said, "Thank you." She was quiet for a very long time. When I looked up, she was crying, not the way the wounded cry, but the way a person cries who has held something for a very long time and been set down. At last, somewhere it is safe to let it go, silently, her clear gray eyes running over, and she was looking at me as if she were trying to see whether I was real. "I mend nets," she said at last in a small wrecked voice. "I scrub the still room. I'm nobody, my lord. You've got the wrong." "I have the only right there has ever been," I said. "Say my name." "My lord. My name it is Torin. My mate does not call me my lord." Her mouth worked around it as though it were a foreign word. "Torin," she said, and at the sound of it in her voice, I will not pretend to dignity here. Something in my chest that had been clenched shut for 11 years came open, and the ache of it was very great and very good. "There," I said, "now sleep. You have a rib to knit and a hold to meet, and it will all keep. Sleep, Alice, I am not going anywhere, and neither, it seems, are the wolves." She slept, and I sat and watched her breathe, and outside the window the sea I still could not hear held its silence, patient, as though it too were waiting to see whether she would let herself be loved. It is one thing for a king to name his mate. It is another for a hold to swallow it, and Kethmore did not swallow it whole in a day. They loved her already, some of them, Wend and the kitchen, who wept and brought her broth and confessed to her, one by one, in the manner of people easing a long guilt, every kindness she had ever done them that they had taken without thanks. The children loved her without complication, the way children do. Kale would not be kept from her, and once Maddox allowed it, the boy spent his hours curled against her good side while she told him the old coast tales in a low voice. And I would come in from the wall and find the two of them asleep like that, the wolves around them, and stand in the doorway longer than a king has any business standing anywhere. But a hold is not only its kitchen and its children. A hold has its Orans. Master Oran, my hall steward, was not a cruel man. I want to be fair to him, because what happened between us mattered, and because I have come to believe that the Orans of the world do more harm than the cruel ever do, and mean less by it. He was a careful man, a proud man, a man who had spent 40 years keeping the order of a great house and who believed down to the marrow in the rightness of that order, that a king weds a queen, that blood answers blood, that the girl who scrubs the still room is a good and necessary thing exactly where she is and nowhere else. When I named Ali's, Oren did not rage. He did worse. He grew correct. He served her with a bow so precisely deep it was an insult, and said "my lady" in a voice that put the words in quotes, and managed, in 100 small correct ways, to make it known throughout the hold that the steward of Kethmore considered his king to have taken leave of his senses over a kitchen girl, and was too loyal to say so, and suffered nobly. I knew all of it. I let it run a while, because I have learned that a thing you crush by command grows back in the dark, and I wanted this pulled up by the root. And because I was waiting, though I did not fully know it, for the right ground to do it on. Alice felt it, of course. She felt it more keenly than I did, because she had lived her whole life reading exactly this, the temperature of a room she had entered, the precise degree to which she was or was not welcome, the difference between a beau that honors and a beau that mocks. She never complained, but I saw her grow smaller in the great hall, saw her reach for the plain gray manner of the still room like a coat against the cold, and it made me angrier than any open thing could have. The reckoning came on a gray afternoon 3 weeks into her mending, when she was strong enough to walk the hold on my arm, and Oren, misjudging, thinking, I believe, that he was doing his king a service, saving him from himself, chose the full hall to make his stand. She had asked to see the still room. Her own instinct, wanting to check that the kitchen's small hurts were being tended in her absence. That was Ali's entire, mending on her feet before she could climb a stair without stopping. We came through the hall, and Oren was there with the household about him, and he stepped into our path and bowed his correct bow, and said, in a voice pitched to carry the length of that hall, "My lord, forgive me. Before the lady tires herself among the servants, I wonder if this is quite the moment to consider the hold's opinion. There are old families here who have served your house since your grandfather's day. There is the matter of what is owed to blood and to the dignity of the seat. A wound bravely taken is a fine thing, none deny it, but a hold is a delicate order, and a girl of no name, raised from the still room to the Luna seat, it unsettles the natural. Master Oren," I did not raise my voice, "I have found that a king rarely needs to. What is Ali's owed?" He faltered, "My lord." "You spoke of what is owed to blood, to the dignity of the seat. It is a favorite word of yours, owed. You keep the ledgers, you would know its weight. So I ask you a ledger question, steward to king. What is owed to Ali's?" I felt her hand tighten on my arm, wanting to stop this, wanting to sink back into invisibility where it was safe, and I covered her hand and held it there and did not let her disappear. 11 years she has dressed the burns of your kitchen and asked no thanks. 11 years she has mended the nets that feed this hall you are so anxious for the dignity of. 3 weeks ago she crossed a burning court, unarmed, against a reaver's axe, and put her own body over the heir of Kethmore, and took into her side the blade that was meant to end my brother's line, and she did it. She has told me, because there was no one else and the boy was little. Not for a reward. She did not know I watched. She expected to die scrubbing my floors and thought that was the whole of what her life was for. So, in your careful ledger of what is owed to blood and to dignity, Oren, what is owed to the girl who saved the blood of my house with her own? The hall was very quiet. You speak of natural order, I went on, and now I let a little of it into my voice, the thing that moves men across a yard. I will tell you the natural order of Kethmore, and you will enter it in your ledgers, and it will not be unentered while I hold this seat. When my hold burned, the great families you would have me honor were behind their doors. The dignity of the seat was hiding in a passage clutching its robes, was it not, steward? And a girl of no name ran the wrong way, toward the axe, because a child was crying. That is the natural order. The worth was there the whole time, and we were all of us too proud or too blind to see it, and it took a reaver's blade to open our eyes, and I will not close them again to spare your ledgers. Ali's is my mate, not raised to the seat recognized at it, where the fates put her, and where she has more right to sit than any soul in this hall, myself first among them. You may make your peace with that, Oren, and I hope you will, because I have valued you 40 years and would grieve to lose you. But you will make it, or you will keep your correct bows and your quoted, my lady, for some hold that has not seen what this one has seen. And then Ali spoke, and undid me, and did more with 3 sentences than I had done with my whole speech. Master Oren, she said, and her voice was not angry. It was the voice she used on a burn, gentle and steady, the voice of someone who has decided to heal a thing rather than win against it. You kept this hall in good order all the years I scrubbed it, and I was glad of the order. It was a safe place to be small in. I don't want your seat, and I never asked for it. I don't rightly know yet if I'm fit for the one the king says is mine. She drew a breath. I felt the wound cost her it. But I'll tell you what I do know, because I mended it enough times. Your knee. The left one that stiffens in the wet, and you'll not let Maddox at it out of pride. I used to leave the willow bark tincture on the low shelf where you'd find it and think it was your own idea, so you'd not have to ask a scullion for help. 11 years. She said it without a barb, as a plain fact laid down. I'd go on leaving it if you'll let me. I don't need you to bow. I'd just as soon we tended each other. That's all the natural order I know. Old Oren stood in the middle of that silent hall and looked at the girl he had, my lady, Ed, with such precise contempt, and his careful, correct face came apart. Because it is one thing to be defeated by your king, and quite another to learn that the girl you scorned has been secretly, wordlessly easing your body's pain for 11 years and letting you keep your pride about it. And the proud steward of Kethmore put his hand over his eyes, there in the full hall, and wept. And when he could speak, he did not bow his mocking bow. He went down, stiff knee and all, onto both knees on the stone which no command of mine could have bought, and said, "Forgive me, my lady," and meant every letter of it. She would not let him kneel. She crossed and took his arm and got him up, this girl still 3 weeks off a near-mortal wound, and said something to him too low for the hall to hear that made the old man nod and press her hand, and it was done. Not commanded. Healed. The way she healed everything, quietly from underneath, leaving you your dignity, so that you never quite saw the moment it happened. I looked at her, my net mender, raising up my proud old steward with her scarred side barely knit, and I thought, I did not choose well. I did not choose at all. But the fates, that kept her back from me. The fates chose better than any king's counsel ever could, and I will spend my life being worthy of their choosing, and I will likely fall short, and I will keep trying anyway. That is when the horns came again. Gan the Gaunt had not come 3 seasons for nothing, and he had not been broken at the Iron Mouth and broken again at our strand and simply gone home. I should have known it. A wolf that keeps a wound warm does not lick it twice and forsake it. He had drawn off to lick, and to count, and to learn, and now, with the storm season closing the northern water, with one last tide before the gales locked us in till spring, he came back for the whole of it, and he came in the dark, and he came clever. The first raid had taught him our strand. This time he did not come at the strand. The horns woke the hold near midnight, and the wall basins flared, and we ran to the sea wall as we had before, and the sea before us was empty. Black, heaving, empty. No ships. And in the half-breath of relief before the dread, Bren beside me went gray to the lips and said, "The Iron Mouth. He's in the mouth." And I understood the whole of it at once, and my blood went to water. There is a channel north of the hold where the cliffs pinch the sea into a narrow race, the Iron Mouth, where we broke him 3 years gone. It is a killing water, all rock and rip, and no reaver in his senses takes ships through it in the dark. But past it, behind the north headland, there is a shingle, the low cove, the drowned cove, the one the storms take. It is unwatched because it is unreachable. The cliff path down to it fell into the sea a generation ago, and the only way up from that shingle to the hold is a black tide passage through the headland rock that floods to the roof at high water and that no living soul uses, because no living soul knows the tides of it well enough to dare, because the family that knew it. I turned to Alice. She had come up onto the wall wrapped in my cloak against the healer's orders, because she could no more stay from a wall with the horns blowing than she could have stayed from the court, and she was already staring north into the dark with a look on her face I did not understand, and then, all at once, terribly did. "He's landing in the drowned cove," she said. "He's bringing them up through the headland, through the tide passage." She turned to me, and her clear gray eyes were wide, and there was no fear in them. There was calculation. There was a girl reading the sea the way Oren read a ledger. "Torin, he doesn't know the tides of it. Nobody knows the tides of it. He'll bring his men up into the passage on the flood thinking it's a road, and it's not a road, it's a—" She stopped. "How long since low water?" "I don't." I looked to Bren, who shook his head. "We did not keep the tides of a passage no one used." "I do." She said it flatly, and the whole weight of the night turned on those two words. "The net menders knew that cove. My people worked that low shingle before the storm took them. Before the storm took them there, Torin, in that cove. I was born to those tides. I've known them since before I knew my letters. I know the drowned cove and the headland passage the way you know your own stair." She gripped the wall. "He'll be coming up it now on the making tide, 100 men in the dark, and in—" Her eyes went distant, reckoning, in a little under an hour, that passage floods, roof to floor. It'll drown anything in it. But that's an hour he has to reach the low court and open our own gate from the inside. And if he makes it, he's inside our wall with 100 men and the whole hold between him and the children. "Then we hold the low court," I said. "We meet them where the passage lets out, and we—" "You'll meet them into 100 blades in a place 2 men wide," she said. "And while you die winning it, he'll have sent half his strength round the long way, and the children will be—" She caught my arm. "No, listen to me. Listen to the net mender." And there was steel in it, the steel that had crossed a burning court, and I listened. "There's a second way up from that passage. A crawl, a chimney in the rock halfway along that comes out in the old net store above the cove. My people used it to get above the water when a tide caught them wrong. Gan won't know it. Nobody knows it who wasn't born to that shingle. I can take a small band up the chimney behind him, get above him in the passage, and I know to the minute when that water comes. If we're above it when it floods and he's below—" She did not finish. She did not have to. Bren was staring at her. Oren, who had followed us onto the wall, was staring at her. I was staring at her, at this girl 3 weeks off her deathbed, wrapped in my cloak, calmly proposing to lead men into a flooding passage in the dark on the strength of tides she had learned as a child in the cove that had orphaned her, and to use the very sea that had taken her people to break a reaver lord and save my hold's children. "It's too dangerous," I said. "Your wound, if your timing is off by—" "My timing will not be off." She said it without heat and without doubt, and I believed her because it was not pride, it was the plain confidence of the one true expert in a room full of the ignorant. "You want to know what I'm good for, Torin? You keep saying you looked through me 11 years. This is what you looked through. I know this sea. Not the strand, anyone knows the strand. I know the drowned places. I know the water nobody else will go near, because it's the water that made me, and I never had a use for it till now, and I have one now, and you are not going to send me to sit by the fire while it's the one thing in this whole hold only I can do." Her hand tightened. "You asked me why I ran at the axe. There wasn't anybody else. Torin, there isn't anybody else. Not for this. There's only me. And a king learns, if he is lucky, and if the fates are very patient with him, that loving something does not mean keeping it small and safe by the fire. That the truest way to honor what she was, the thing the whole hold had looked through, was to let her be it, at the very moment it cost me the most to allow." "Then you'll not go alone," I said, and it was the hardest sentence I have ever said. "Bren, 20 of the fast ones light, no male drowns you. You go where she says, when she says, exactly as she says, and you bring her back. And if you bring back the whole world but not her, I will have your gray head. Alice leads. On the water she is your king. Do you understand me?" "I," said Bren, and looked at the net mender with something in his old face I had never seen him give anyone but me, and it was trust. And so I did the second hardest thing, which was to let her go up into the dark headland at the head of 20 of my best men, while I took the rest to hold the low court as the anvil to her hammer, to stand where the passage led out and be the thing Gan had to break through, and be seen to be breaking, so that the reaver would push all his strength up into that stone throat, hurrying to overwhelm the king before the tide he did not fear could matter. It went as she said it would. Everything exactly to the minute went as she said. We met them at the passage mouth in the low court, and I made it a hard, loud, desperate fight, and I let Gan see me. Let him see the king of Kethmore holding the line with too few men and buying every yard with blood, and it drew him the way I had drawn him at the strand. Only now it was he who had forgotten the sea. He poured his men up into the passage behind him, 100 blades filling that stone throat to break the last of us, smelling the hold's children beyond, and I held, and my men died holding, and I did not know I could not know, fighting in that press with no sight of the dark headland. Whether she was above the water or under it, whether I was buying time with my men's lives or buying nothing at all over her drowned body, and I have never in my life been so afraid. And I have never fought so hard to hide it. And then the sea took them. You do not see a passage flood from outside it. You hear it. There is a sound, I will hear it till I die, a vast wet inhalation, the whole iron sea drawing breath and then pouring itself into a throat of rock. And after it, out of the passage mouth we were dying to hold, there came not more reavers but water, black and white and roaring, and with it, the sudden human sound of 100 men understanding all at once that the road they stood in was not a road, that the salt-orphan of a drowned cove had made a weapon of the very tide that drowned her people, and that Gan the Gaunt had marched his strength into a grave and pulled the sea in after them. She had counted right, to the minute. She and Bren and the 20 had gone up the chimney behind the reavers and got above the flood line into the old net store, and they held that high mouth against the few who tried to climb clear, and the sea did the rest. The sea alleys knew, the sea that made her, closing its jaws on the reaver lord in the one place in all the coast where he could be caught, because the one soul who knew that place had been scrubbing my floors for 11 years while I looked through her. Gan the Gaunt drowned in the iron mouth with the tide in his throat, and Kethmore's children slept through the whole of it in the sea caves, and I did not know any of it was won. I only knew the water was pouring where the reavers had been, until a torch showed at the high mouth of the net store across the flooded court, and a figure stood in it wrapped in a king's gray cloak, small against the black rock, one hand pressed to her wounded side and the other raised so that I would know her, so that I would know she was above the water, so that I would know she had come back. I have held the wall of Kethmore 11 years. I did not hold it that moment. I put down my sword in the middle of the court, and I looked up at her across the roaring water, and I let every man in that hold see their king undone, and I did not care, and I would not now unmake a moment of it. There is a cove below the west shoulder of Kethmore, small and sheltered, where the net menders used to work before the sea took the low families, and it had lain empty and unclaimed a generation. I gave it to her. Not as a Luna's estate, she would have refused an estate, she nearly refused this. I gave it to her as the thing it was, her people's cove, her people's work, given back into the hands of the last of them to be hers to do with as she chose. She chose to mend nets in it. Of course she did. The Luna of Kethmore keeps a net mender's cove and works in it with her own scarred hands on the fair days, and the children of the hold come down to her there, Kale first among them always, and she teaches them the tides, the safe water and the drowned water, which is which and why, so that no child of this coast will ever again grow up not knowing the sea that made them, and so that the knowledge that saved the hold will never again live in one overlooked soul alone. We were wed in the spring, when the storm season let go of the water and the first fair light came back to the gray sea. Not in the great hall. She asked for the cove, and she asked for it small, and so it was small the kitchen, and the children and Bren and old Oren who gave her away himself, walking her over the shingle on his mended knee with a face like a man who has been given back something he thought he'd traded off cheap. The wolves came, the whole gray pack, and lay along the tide line. Ashgree walked at her other side, and when I took her scarred hand in mine before her people, on the cove her own blood had come from, I finally understood what the silence had been for. Because the sea came back to me in that moment. My whole life I had heard it, and for a season I had not, from the night I lifted her bleeding in the court. The iron sea had held its breath in my ears, and I had lived in a hush I could not fill, waiting. And there on the shingle, with her hand in mine and her clear gray eyes on my face and the words said that made her mine and me hers, the sea let its breath go, and the roar came back all at once, but changed, wholly changed. No longer the loud cold floor under a mateless life, but a thing with her in it. The water she was born to and had turned to my hold saving. And I heard it new, the way you hear a thing you had never once until that moment understood you loved. I had thought when I was young that the fates kept back for a king some hidden queen of white fur and old blood, and that finding her would be one high thing knowing another. I was wrong in every part. The fates kept back for me a net mender's orphan with ash on her arms who dressed the kitchen's hurts in secret and asked nothing and ran the wrong way at an axe because a child was crying. And finding her was not one high thing knowing another. It was a proud blind king being shown, by a reaver's fallen blade, the best soul in his own hold, standing in plain sight where she had always stood, waiting 11 years for him to have the eyes. She is beside me now most evenings on the cliff above the west cove, mending in the last light while the tide comes in below us, and the children's voices carry up thin and glad from the shingle. She does not sit in the high seat much. She says the still room taught her she thinks better on her feet, and I have stopped arguing, because she is right about the sea, and she is right about people, and she is nearly always right about me. Sometimes she catches me watching her the way I watched her asleep those first gray nights, and she does not tell me to stop. She only reaches over and puts her scarred hand over mine, the way she once left willow bark on a low shelf so a proud old man need never ask quietly from underneath, leaving me my dignity, and we sit, and we listen to the sea come in. I will tell you the last of it, the thing I keep out of everything. It is not the wedding, nor the nomming, nor even the night the tide took Gan and gave her back to me across the water. It is a small thing from an ordinary evening long after. Cale, grown taller, came up the cliff path to find us, and stopped a little way off the way children do when they think they are not seen, and he watched the two of us sitting there, the king of Kethmore and the net mender, her hand over his, the wolves at their feet, the gray sea coming in, and he did not know I had turned and seen him. And I watched my brother's son look at us with the plain, grave face of a boy learning what a thing is worth, and I heard him say to himself, so quietly the wind nearly took it, "That's the one who came back for me. Not the king, not the Luna, the one who came back for him. That is what she is in the mouth of the child she saved, and it is the truest name she has, and it is the one I would have carved over the both of us when our time on this coast is done. Here lie two who came back into the wrong water for the sake of someone small and were kept. The sea is loud tonight. I am glad of it. It was quiet too long.